Hello, and welcome to my channel. This is Inspired by Christ, where we talk about everything Jesus, God, salvation, and whatever He inspires me to talk about. Today, we are continuing this Nehemiah series. We are on chapter 13. We've been taking basically a chapter a day and just reviewing it. Most of the time I don't read the chapter beforehand, because I don't read the chapter beforehand, it tends to just become kind of a one-way conversation of things that I notice as we read the chapter together. I had a full video recorded basically, and then as I was winding up and getting to the end, it cut off. So I'm going through this again, and I have in fact been through chapter 13, the very last chapter of the book, but you all don't get to see that draft. I'm sorry. And we're doing this all over again. So yeah, if you're interested in this series, go back and watch from video 1 or from wherever you left off. I will link the playlist somewhere. And we're just gonna get through it. I'll be reading from the KJV like usual. On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever. Because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now it came to pass, when they had heard the law, that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. And before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, was allied unto Tobiah. And he had prepared for him a great chamber, where aforetime they laid the meat offerings, the frankincense, and the vessels, and the tithes of the corn, the new wine, and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the offerings of the priests. But in all this time was not I at Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes king of Babylon came I unto the king, and after certain days obtained I leave of the king. And I came to Jerusalem, and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah, in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me sore, therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. Then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God, with the meat offering and the frankincense. And I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field. Then contended I with the rulers, and said, Why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together, and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn, and the new wine, and the oil into the treasuries. And I made treasurers over the treasuries, Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites Pedaiah. And next to them was Hanan the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, and for the offices thereof. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. And I contended with them, and cursed them, and smote certain of them, and plucked off their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. Shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil, to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, everyone in his business. And for the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. So I may go through this a little quickly. The first video I recorded, like you could see in real time as I was looking up and discovering new things. But now that I know them, I can just explain them. So the first thing that came to mind when I first started reading this chapter is from verse 1, basically to verse 3. On that day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now it came to pass, when they had heard the law, that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. So the reason I bring that up is because if you know the story of Ruth, you know that she was a Moabite woman. And the first thing that came to mind when I first read this was even the time period that we may have been born in can be considered a mercy. Because if Ruth had been born after, if she had been born after the Moabites had offended Israel and they didn't do any good to them. They didn't. It said they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them that he should curse them. So they intentionally sought to curse the Israelites. And if Ruth had been born in that period, then considering her story, she wouldn't have been able to enter into Israel. And then the line of King David and the line of Jesus wouldn't be as we know it today. Because just, I guess, a quick overview of the story of Ruth. There was a woman named Naomi. She had a husband and 2 sons. And when Israel had been in a time of famine, they went to the land of Moab. And while they were there, Naomi's husband and her sons died. But before the sons died, they had each taken a wife. One of the women was Orpah and the other was Ruth. And for Naomi, when her husband and sons died and the famine in Israel had passed, she was basically like, okay, I guess I'm gonna just go back to my hometown because there's not really anything left for me here. And both Orpah and Ruth were going to follow her because she's their mother-in-law. But Naomi was like, no, just stay in your hometown. You can find another man to marry because I don't have anyone. Because I think it was typical, if you have more than one child, more than one son, then if the first son dies and he was married, then the wife goes to the next son in line, I believe it was. And so Naomi was like, I don't have any more sons for you to marry. I don't have anything to offer you. You may as well just stay in your homeland. And Orpah was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. But Ruth was like, nah, wherever you go, I'm going to follow you. And your God is going to be my God. So she follows Naomi back to Israel. And everybody welcomes Naomi back. And Ruth starts working in the fields. And she's working in the field of a man named Boaz. And Boaz, he comes one day and he sees her working and he's like, who's that woman? And when I say working, she's really like, her labor was not harvesting, but I think when the men would work in the fields, if they had like leftover grains, she would pick up those leftover scraps, kind of. So that's how she was working, and that's how she was providing for herself and Naomi. And so Boaz noticed her, and the overseer was like, oh, she's just been like picking up the scraps and working in the field or whatnot. And Boaz was like, okay, make sure none of the men mess with her and make sure they intentionally leave some bits from what they harvest so that she can pick it up. Kind of make her job easier, I think it was. And when Naomi heard about this, she was like, okay, tonight get kind of dressed up and have a cloak or something and go to the threshing floor where the men are and lay at Boaz's feet. And so Ruth did it. And when Boaz woke up and saw her at his feet, he was like, hey, what's going on? But how did this come about? Obviously, I'm paraphrasing the 4 chapters for you all, but what was the conversation? Basically, the way I understand it, Ruth laying at his feet was like saying, I submit to you. And Boaz was like, you're a faithful young woman. You didn't chase after any of these younger guys. So the Lord's going to bless you. And did he tell her the plan? I think he mentioned that there was one other person in line that could redeem their family's land. And so he had to work out that situation. So I want to say the next day, he called that person out, the person who could redeem the land. And he was like, hey, there's this land from Naomi's husband, and it looks like you're the next kin that's eligible to redeem it. Is that what you want to do? And at first the guy is like, yes. And then Boaz says, just be aware, if you redeem it, you also have to take in Ruth, the Moabite woman. And that's when the other guy was like, oh, nah, I already got my own inheritance and I ain't trying to mess that up. In a nutshell. And so with that, since he didn't redeem the land, Boaz ended up becoming the redeemer, and so he married Ruth. But Ruth was a Moabite woman. That's the whole point. I just wanted to give y'all some background. Ruth was a Moabite woman, and if she had been born, um, if she had been born in a period where the Moabites had already intentionally tried to curse the Israelites, then she wouldn't have been welcome into the congregation of God. So even sometimes the time period that we're born in can be considered a mercy. That's just what came to my thought. But also, back to verse 3, now it came to pass when they had heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. And so what that made me think of is when we don't consult with God before getting involved with something or someone, cutting stuff off isn't always easy, especially depending on how long we may have been involved with it. Like there's emotional attachments, maybe physical attachments or whatnot, but getting rid of it isn't always easy. And so when we don't consult with God beforehand, like, hey, God, is this something I should be getting into? Is this something I should be getting involved with? What do you think? And if he says, like, if he gives you a clear indication that you should be separated from whatever that thing is, I just think it's a little less heartbreak and or heartache when we go to God first and we actually listen in obedience if he says not to get involved with something. Because these people, we do have to remember they were being brought back from captivity, and so they had been exposed to different practices, some of which they may have picked up themselves. And so being brought back, they realized just how far away from God's word they were, that they were doing the complete opposite. And so they had to cut off the mixed multitudes. And we're reading it in black and white. It just says, it came to pass when they heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. But that doesn't mean that there weren't any feelings involved. So, like, what if one of the men was married to a Moabite woman? And now all of a sudden the law is saying they're not welcome into the congregation. Do you choose to leave the full congregation of God and go to some strange land to live with the Moabite woman? Like, there are still attachments there. And just because we're reading it in black and white, it doesn't mean that it was easy to do this separation. That was a new point that didn't make it into the last video. Whew. So this is what I had to do some looking up on. Verse 4. And before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, was allied unto Tobiah. Do you all remember who Tobiah was? Because I didn't remember until I looked him up. I'm going to go back though. I had to look him up because I forgot. I knew the name sounded familiar, but it was one of those cases again where I wasn't sure if we were talking about the same person or if these were different people and they just had the same names. But remember, verse 1, it says, it was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever. If we go all the way back to chapter 2, verse 10, it says, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah, that's that name, Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it. They had just heard about rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem. But we see that Tobiah is a servant and he's an Ammonite. And it's this same Tobiah, going back to chapter 13, verse 4, where it says, "And before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, was allied unto Tobiah." As a reminder, yes, it says Tobiah was an Ammonite, but he was one of the ones working with Sanballat to grieve the Jews as they were rebuilding the wall. He was part of the mocking. He was part of the planning so that they could slay and kill these men or people, because it says some daughters were building the wall too. So we have Eliashib the priest, someone who is over the chamber of the house of God, someone in a high-ranking position, allied with the enemy. And this is why we need discernment. This is exactly why. Because see, if we think about Adam and Eve, I always go back to this example. Is something on my teeth? Gross. Sorry. If we think about this example, Eve was deceived into eating the fruit. But that did not, is the word absolve? That did not absolve her from having consequences. And so a lot of people, especially nowadays, they're like, oh, the church is full of hypocrites and I don't believe in the church because look at what the pastor's doing, look at what the congregation is doing. They don't act any different from the world. And how could God allow that if he's so good and this, that, and the other? It's so easy for people to doubt God based on what humans are doing, which is not how it should work. And a lot of times we end up getting hurt because we don't have the discernment to go to God before the hurt occurs. Like, how many of us are praying over the churches that we go to? Like, am I really supposed to be in this room, in this congregation? How many of us just went along because our parents did, and that's just what you do every Sunday? So when we don't have that discernment and we just allow ourselves to fall into things, it can be easy to get hurt, especially if we ignore any warning signs. Oh, again, going back to Adam and Eve, what we see in Genesis 2 is that God gave Adam the word, and we don't know how Eve got the word, but we know that she knows the rule because when the serpent asked her about it, she repeated the rule. She didn't say it in God's exact words. She added a little bit for herself, but at the foundation of it all, she knew the rule. And so what that says to me is God gives us warnings about, he just gives us warnings. But whether or not we heed to them is a different story. And with it, I will say, do I want to say maybe it's a little harder? I can't speak to whether or not it's more difficult because Adam and Eve, they had like straight relationship with God. There was nothing blocking the way. This is before they ate the fruit. They could go to God about anything and just know that he would hear them. They could speak to him about the most casual of things. But when sin entered the world, it was kind of like a veil had come down, and then there was a separation. So what's coming into mind now is how they had how Moses built the temple of God, and then there's like this super hidden inner room that a high priest could only go in once a year. And that's the only time you could truly come into the presence of God, if that makes sense. And it's because sin has become like a block and a barrier for how we can relate with God. But once we accept Jesus Christ and he forgives all of our sins, that kind of lifts that veil up. How'd I get here? It lifts the veil and it... But I say all that to say, even though they were as close to God as they were, Eve still ended up being deceived, but she still had to face the consequences. We do have the additional layer of sin being a blocking force, but God does still send warnings. And he does still get the message across, whatever that may look like. And if we don't heed to that, if we don't have the discernment to know, oh, this is God warning me, then it can be easy to fall into a trap of the enemy. Goodness. It felt like I was rambling a lot just to get to that last point. But anyway, you have a high priest allied with the enemy. And now the enemy, he's getting everything that the people should be getting. Because Eliashib prepared a great chamber, and then they had the meat offerings, the frankincense, some vessels. I think that means like pottery and cups and pots and stuff, I think. And tithes of the corn, new wine, and oil, all of which was supposed to be given to the Levites and the singers and the porters and as offerings of the priests. So everything that God's people are supposed to be getting is being given over to their enemies by a high priest, one who's supposed to be a man of God, overseeing the house of God. Look at that. That's why we got to have discernment. Who are our leaders? And then, see, he was getting away with this because Nehemiah wasn't there. But when Nehemiah came back, he was like, oh no, we ain't having this. And so he kicked him out. And all of his stuff. And then told the servants to clean it. And then he realized that the Levites weren't getting their portion because it says word fled everyone to his field. I guess that means they had to work in the fields, so they had to take away their time. They had to take away time from what they were called to do this work because somebody was unfaithful in his position. Is how I understand it. And then, see, Nehemiah is always getting on these rulers and these nobles. Why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. So here it's demonstrated as multiple people being involved, like Nehemiah against the rulers. But this actually kind of had me start thinking about how there's that saying, you can't control the actions of others, but you can control how you react to a situation. And so it's like each one of us is at least a ruler over ourselves, kind of. And the only reason I say kind of is because it's not through our own power or strength that we like control the flesh or anything. It takes partnering with God on that. But we do at least have the power to, as we're faced with something, do we want to go God's way or do our own thing? And so we always have the power of those choices. And sometimes it may take a little inner dialogue, like, A, you realize you're slacking in this area that God told you to work on, or that God told you to do, that God told you to uphold or keep up or whatnot. Why are you forsaking it? Sometimes we need those checks. Maybe a lot of times we need those checks. And then he made treasurers over the treasuries, for they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. Mm. And then we have verse 15. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. So here we have people working on the Sabbath, which the Sabbath is supposed to be a day consecrated to holiness and rest. And so maybe this is them bringing in old mindsets from when they were in captivity. Maybe they weren't allowed periods of rest, and so maybe in their mind they're thinking, oh, we gotta work, and maybe they just didn't really know how to rest. But then you also have these people of Tyre, which I'm pretty sure means they're not Israelites. So strange people from a strange land, the foreigners, and they're coming and trying to sell their goods too. And again, Nehemiah has to contend with the nobles and say, hey, why are y'all doing evil and profaning the Sabbath day? And so this reminds me of that when Jesus was like turning over tables and saying, what did he say? You den of thieves? Why are you making, or was it, why are you making my father's house a den of thieves? Let me see. I'm gonna look it up. Matthew 21 and 13. Matthew 21. And said unto them, it is written, my house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. Oh, I'll go back one verse. And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, it is written, my house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. There we go. Those are the words. So that's what that verse reminded me of, them working and selling stuff on the Sabbath day when it was supposed to be made holy unto the Lord. And so, what does Nehemiah do about this? First of all, again, he speaks with the nobles like, hey, why are y'all doing evil? We can't be afraid to speak out against leadership. And also, when we look at verse 18, it says, did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So it's like the Israelites, remember, they were read the book of Moses, and so they know that they were not obeying the law of the Lord. And so Nehemiah is here like, bruh, You know, Israel got in trouble because our ancestors did this. Why are you doing the same thing? As if you won't be punished as well. It's like people forgot that quickly the punishment that they just came from. I don't know. And so, what did he do? He just says, shut the gates before the Sabbath, when it gets dark before the Sabbath, and don't open them back up until after the Sabbath. So sometimes we have to set those hard boundaries. Like, I can't do this, can't do that. If it's going to keep us from sinning, we should set those hard boundaries. But then even with that, some of the people were persistent, because even when the gates were closed, they just waited outside the gate so that they could make a sale for whenever the gates were open. And so Nehemiah said, hey, y'all continue to wait out here on the Sabbath day. I'm going to put my hands on you. He said, y'all going to get these hands. Sorry, it's not funny. Yeah, he said, y'all going to get these hands. And remembering to sanctify the gates for the Sabbath day. Oh. I'm sorry, it's not funny. Back to verse 23. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. So see, we have those mixed couples. When you get involved with something that you're not supposed to get involved with, when it's time for that separation, it may hurt. Probably will hurt. I think that's all but guaranteed. And then their children, they could speak in the other languages, but not the Jews. So I think that shows how, like, the Jews weren't living up to a standard where they were showing the proper influence to these foreigners. And so it was like the foreigners' ways and practices that were not of God were prevalent. And Nehemiah is like, nah, bruh. And I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them and plucked off their hair and made them swear by God, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons or for yourselves. So with all of that, what does that mean? Because I think, I'm going to look it up before I start talking. But it was my impression that based on what Jesus said, I thought we were only allowed to get a divorce in the case of adultery. But here, if they're saying that Matthew 19:9. Here, if they're saying that, oh, it's very close. Does that mean that the Israelites were forced to separate from their wives and children because they were of the people that they were told could not enter into the congregation? Or was it that they had to be kicked out from Jerusalem altogether because they couldn't divorce? Do you know what I mean? So let me see. Okay, I'm going to just start at verse 1. So Matthew 19, verse 1, it says, and it came to pass that when Jesus had finished these sayings, he departed from Galilee and came into the coast of Judea beyond Jordan, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? And he answered and said unto them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. They say unto him, Why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement, and to put her away? He saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away doth commit adultery. So yes, except it be for fornication. So I'm not very clear on how that works. Was the whole family kicked out of Israel because they couldn't have the mixed families, or did they just have to leave their foreign husbands and wives and say, hey, y'all ain't welcome here, but this is where I'm supposed to be, so you gotta dip? I don't know. I'm not too clear on that part, but they got their hair plucked off, they got cursed, and then they had to swear by God not to give. Oh. Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. So they weren't allowed to be married to anyone else in the congregation of God. The mixed ones, the foreigners, the ones that weren't Israelites, I think is saying that they can't be given in marriage to anyone that is a Jew. Oh, so maybe they weren't forced to leave. They were just forced to be forever single. And then he goes into how Solomon, the wisest king, beloved by God, how it was him taking in all these strange women. He called them outlandish women. And that's what caused him to sin. Which also, when you think about it, God knowing absolutely everything, he knew all these strange wives would cause Solomon to sin. But he still has so much love for Solomon. If you need a reminder, God, how do I want to word this? God looks at us from the perspective of what he knows we can become when we walk out the faith walk with him. Not from the perspective of, oh, you're such a sinner, you deserve to rot in hell, but I guess I'm gonna be merciful and good to you because blah, 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 blah. But he's truly a good God that sees us as the, I don't want to say as the good we're supposed to be, because we're not good ourselves. That only God is good. But just sees us for the creation that he made us to be, I guess. The masterpiece that we're supposed to become when it's all said and done. And so when he communicates with us, I think it's important to remember that, because I sometimes I lose sight of that, and it kind of brings out feelings of condemnation instead of conviction. But then I have to remind myself, wait a minute, if God is telling me this, it's from a place of love, because he knows that there is better, that I can become better, I guess. I hope I explained that properly. And then in verse 28 it says, and one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. So remember, Sanballat was one of the enemies. He was grieved when he heard that they were going to rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. He tried to mock them and kill them. And now his son-in-law, one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest. So the way I'm understanding it, we have Eliashib, the one who's allied with Tobiah. Remember, the enemy. Eliashib has a son named Joiada. And one of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. So we have Eliashib, who has a son, who married Sanballat's daughter. And so Eliashib is also connected to Sanballat. So he's connected to all the enemies. And Nehemiah had to chase the son-in-law from him because he recognizes he's in alignment with the enemy. Can't have that. And I think too, the overarching, however you pronounce that, part of the overarching theme of this chapter is that when something is not of God, we have to be intentional about resisting it, about getting rid of it, about not having it in our lives. We can't just like hope everything passes. Nehemiah had to chase these people out of the gates. He ordered them to close the gates and not open, and even then they camped around the gates. And then he had to say, hey bruh, if you gonna stay here on the Sabbath day and bring this burden on us, we gonna fight. Because he was about that life. And so if we're just passive, that's almost the same as being accepting to what the enemy, it's almost being accepting to what the enemy wants to do. So if Nehemiah had just allowed them to sit at the gates, maybe at some point they would have been worn down, and then they would have opened the gates out of compromise. They may have been tempted, like, oh, I may need a little bit more money this week, and that one has something I really like, or whatever the case may be. It just, when we don't take steps to actively resist the enemy, it can be easy for temptation to creep in. And so I just think this was a chapter of when we're cleansing ourselves and trying to do right by God, we really have to be intentional and take action in getting rid of everything that we know is not of God. So mixing with the Moabites, they had to clean up the priest that was allied with the one, what's his name, Tobiah. They had to clean up the priest. They had to get rid of the son-in-law and chase him out. Nehemiah was pulling people's hair and cursing them. Don't go around cursing people, I guess. But he was making it a point that you're not allowed to do the ways of the enemy here, because that's just going to bring burden to God's people. And I think just the overall connection of the high priest not serving in his position correctly and being allied with the enemy and giving over all of these goods to the enemy when they should have been given to the people, the Levites and the singers and the porters and that whole list of people. When someone is not performing, when someone is not doing their role or serving in their role as they're called to serve, it affects the community as a whole. And maybe that's why leaders have, I think, higher responsibility. So like, if you're going to be a leader and you're doing wrong, it's going to affect the entire congregation. And as it affects the entire congregation, maybe that is what leads them into temptation. Because remember, it says that the Levites and the singers were out in the field. And that's how Nehemiah knew that they weren't getting what they were supposed to get, because they were already supposed to be provided for. And so that almost force of hand, because these people have to eat, them being pushed into that instead of being able to fully focus on the role that they were supposed to be in, whatever they were supposed to be doing as Levites or whatever they were supposed to be doing as singers. They couldn't focus on that because they had to work in the fields. And now you open up the temptation to thinking, to the mindset that, oh, I thought God was supposed to provide for me, but I don't see my provision, where in actuality that provision was there, but the person over it, the person that was supposed to be managing it, wasn't acting in accordance to God's will. And so that opens the door for temptations and possibly a mindset of lack, which may be why, another reason why they were originally open to buying and selling things on the Sabbath day, like not wanting to feel that lack, or maybe thinking that because now they have an inheritance, they can spend it however they want, and so now they're not stewarding faithfully. But whatever the case may be, they were going against God, and they had just been read the book of the law of Moses to know what they should and should not do, and Nehemiah had to come straighten them up. So sometimes we have to be like Nehemiah, and we have to straighten ourselves up, maybe straighten our friends up, maybe straighten our family up, straighten our community up, straighten our leaders up, straighten our nation up. We can do big things, but it all starts with making sure we're in alignment with God's will. We will stumble and fall, but yeah, just continuing on that walk. Whew. Sorry. That was something to end on. So I hope this was helpful. Now I kind of want to go back and see if I can find some more nuggets, because you can read the same scripture 10,000 times over and always find something different or find a new way to apply it. So yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But yeah, that's the end of this series. We made it. 13 days, 13 chapters in the third month of the year. There's not a 13th month, but yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this, and if you did, maybe I can do it with another book of the Bible. But yeah, if you have any comments on Nehemiah or on this series, just let me know in the comments, and I'll see you later. Bye.